There are 4 deadly viruses spreading throughout the world, and only you and your elite team of medical professionals can stop it. Think of the bubonic plague, or malaria, or dysentery. That's the premise for Pandemic, and unfortunately for you, in this universe, there is no legendary Madagascar to take refuge against this unrelenting disease. Make note I said medical professionals. You aren't just doctors, you are also engineers, researchers, and dispatchers as well. Because to prevent this insane outbreaks from turning this world into a disease-ridden cesspool, you need more than just medical knowledge. You need a cool head and foresight to prevent Pandemic. It's a cool premise for a cooperative game. I have the first edition of Pandemic, and I acknowledge that there are drastic changes for the roles between my edition and the newest edition. I don't have the newest edition yet, so this review is going to be based off my knowledge of the first edition. That being said, the core mechanics for this game and the overall thematic feel will generally be the same no matter the edition. So, let's ask ourselves a few questions. Is this a fun game? Who would enjoy this game? What are the pitfalls of this game? And is this game worth your money? Let's find out. Setup for this game is pretty easy. You have 2 primary decks to play around, a player deck and an infection deck. Within the player deck are a certain amount of epidemic cards seeded. The amount of epidemic cards determine the difficulty of the game. Then you germinate the initial viruses by drawing from the infection deck. The infection cards will show the location which will have the virus. For example, if I drew the London card, then they would be seeded with viruses, represented by these cubes. The type of virus would be based on the colored location. London in this case would be seeded with the blue virus cubes. Everyone is then given a starting hand of cards from the player deck and a pawn piece. The amount of cards depend on the number of players in the game. You have a maximum hand limit of 7, and anything more than that you have to discard, so keep that in mind. Player cards can do a variety of things, but more on that later. Everyone is also given a role, and each of these roles have a unique abilities, such as moving other people's pieces, or constructing a research center for free. Everyone begins in Atlanta, North America, and in Atlanta you are also given your first research center. Random trivia time, Atlanta is also home of the Center for Disease Control, also known as the CDC. So, the more you know. To win the game, your group of elite, highly trained medical professionals must find a cure to all 4 viruses. To find a cure to a specific virus, you must discard 5 of the appropriate colors and also be on a research center. For example, if I want to cure the bubonic plague, I need to discard 5 blue player cards and be on a research center. To lose the game, there are 3 possible scenarios. Either you are unable to draw any player cards, or you are unable to place any more virus cubes on the board, or you reach an outbreak level of 8, or simply put, this Doomskull. More on that later. Now a turn goes something like this. Each player has 4 actions per turn, and they may spend their action on the following. Moving 1 space per action, which this is pretty self-explanatory. You may also try to find a cure for the disease, which, as mentioned before, requires 5 of the same colored cards, and for the player to be on a research station. You may also try to contain the virus, which removes 1 virus cube per action at the player's location. You can also play a player's card. Player cards are usually cities, and they allow you to fast travel to the indicated city. If you're already at the indicated city, it allows you to travel anywhere else on the board. Alternatively, playing that city card while on the city allows you to construct a research center. To illustrate, say a player has a Tokyo card. They are in Atlanta. They can play the Tokyo card and instantly move to Tokyo. If they are already at Tokyo and they play the Tokyo card, then they can move anywhere else on the board. Alternatively, they can build a research center at Tokyo. So why would you build a research center? Because they act as fast travel points like in most open world video games. If you're at a research center, you can fast travel to any other research center on the board for the price of 1 action. It's pretty useful if you need to get somewhere lickety-split. But keep in mind you can only build a limited number of research center, so don't spam build them. Finally, you can spend an action to trade a card with another player. However, trading has heavy restrictions. You can only trade with another player if you're in the same space as them. Okay, that makes sense. Gotta be next to them to physically trade with them. However, the heavy restriction kicks in when you can only trade cards of the same city the players are standing on. Alright, let me clarify. If a player, for example, wants to trade a Los Angeles card, both players must be standing on the Los Angeles space to trade it. If they are anywhere else, they can't trade it. And the reason why they have it like this is for 1, the balance of the game, and 2, to prevent the dark web from stealing all this information and possibly doing something really bad with it. After spending their actions, players draw 2 cards from their player decks and take on the role of the Infector. The Infector draws cards equals to the level of the infection rate. So this infection rate is represented by this track. So if the infection rate is at 3, then the player would draw 3 cards. The cards would determine which city would get infected, and they would place 1 cube on each city drawn. And here's the kicker. If a city already has 3 cubes on them, then they cannot add any more cubes on them. Woohoo! Good thing, right? Nah. If there are 3 cubes and you try to add more, then an outbreak happens. The outbreak track moves up 1 step closer to Doom, and all surrounding cities add 1 cube of the outbreak color. This can also trigger more outbreak and lead to a virulent downward spiral. The saving grace is each city can only trigger an outbreak just once per turn, so there's no infinite fractal loop that can be created, as cool as that might sound. Of course, all this is moot if you draw the Epidemic card. They're like catastrophic chapter cards, each one heralding a new chapter of demise. Should this preordained fate befalls you, and it will because they are seated at specific intervals based on the difficulty you're playing, then you flip over the bottom card in deck and immediately add 3 cubes to that city. Outbreak rules apply, of course. Then you reshuffle the discard pile and place it on top of the deck. Yes, this means the cities you were trying to keep the T-virus from spreading will be drawn again. Finally, you move the Infector track up 1, so if you moved it from 2 to 3, you'll be drawing 3 cards going forward. The virus is evolving and time is running out. Then it's the next player's turn, and that's generally how the flow of the game goes. One last mechanic to note are these special player cards, called player event cards. They can do a wide variety of things, such as instantly move a player from one location to another, or you become a psychic and foresee the next few infection cards. They may be considered the last line of defense against the near inexhaustible wave of virulence, and best of all, they are a free action that can be played at any time, even during other players' turn. So that's the general rules and flow of the game. How are the quality of pieces? Keep in mind, this is the first edition of the game that I have. The pieces have changed between different editions. But if you're going to buy the first edition, and I'd say if you could find it, then all more power to you, I'd say it's pretty good. Cards have a matted feel and the board is smooth and surprisingly thick compared to most other board games. There's no mat on the board, so it does mean the cards will slide on. Whether that's a positive or negative, that's up to you. Just letting you know. Cubes and pawns are made of solid wood and they're going to be lasting forever. Artwork is simple and clear, but they're a little bit muted. I would have preferred a more dynamic color scheme, if anything. The instruction manual is also uncomplicated and very explicit, so there's going to be no confusion. Keep in mind that the artwork comment has been addressed in a newer version, because the newer version, to me, feels like it has more eye-popping colors. But in the end, who would have fun with this game? It's definitely the definition of co-op for some gamers, so it's definitely for those who want to work together and not have any conflict with other players. To be honest, I didn't feel like a medical professional when playing the game, so if you want that operating room drama feel, you're not going to get that. But what it did succeed at is to capture the essence of an unstable disease rampaging throughout the world. This game is also pretty skill heavy. Notice how I never brought up a dice? It's because luck is minimized pretty well in this game. Yes, there's some elements of luck with the card drawing, but if you're seeking a game where you can card count and predict the next best move and be in place before disaster strike, this is the game for you. This game is very compact. It's really compact for a board game. It's almost like it's a microscopic game. But for reals though, this game is very portable and it can fit onto a small table. There's not that many moving pieces, so you can definitely store it in a tiny college dorm room. If space is a premium, then this game is a highly efficient space saver game. Time-wise, this game can be finished within 30 to 45 minutes. If you have new player or if you're a planning type person, then it could be pushed up to an hour. It doesn't really get much longer than that. So if you have a time crunch, then this game is pretty good to fit into your schedule. Super recommended. That being said, this game is not for everyone. There is a general reputation for a co-op game, and especially this game, that a gamer can hijack everyone's action. This game is no exception, and as I've said it before, if your group has a gamer that overrides the decision of all the players, then you might want to go ahead and rethink this game. If you can tolerate the potential commandeering of player turns, then go ahead and get this game. It's really fun. Other people who might not like this game are those who don't like the theme, which is understandable, or they want a competitive game. This game is purely cooperative and it may not be everyone's cup of tea. So it's a fun game for most people, but how is the pricing? As far as I can tell, the newest version costs somewhere between $30 to $40 US. The old school version isn't available, so stealth brag about that if you have it. But if we're going by what's been said, $30 to $40 is a reasonable price, and I'd definitely say it's worth the money if you like what has been seen so far. It's a fair price to say, and if you find it on sale, it's definitely worth a buy if you have a consistent gaming group. That being said, what do I think of this game? Oh boy. Everyone I played with had a great time with this game. There is definitely replayability with this game in the form of difficulty levels and randomization. If you really want, you can even roleplay your cards and create backstories for the diseases in your team. But there's a catch. I don't really enjoy this game as much as I do with other games. It's more of a personal thing, so take what I say with a grain of salt. It's not that I don't enjoy it, it's just different. Pandemic is still a really fun game, and it captures the feeling of a T-virus destroying the world. But the roles, despite their special abilities, don't really feel that special to me. As you approach the late endgame, the amount of winning choices you have available drops and it becomes clear at a certain point. And I think this is where it differs for some player types. For most people, the player becomes tense and it becomes an amazing game of trying to fight against an onslaught with your team, hoping all your decisions you previously made will fall into places in the last few draws. For some other players, like I guess for me, it loses its mystery and you become either supremely confident in winning or losing. And for players counting cards, they may realize the game becomes impossible to win because you've spent all the incorrect cards. Remember that there is a limited amount of player cards and only so many of a certain colors. If you're not careful, you can easily paint yourself into a corner by recklessly using up all the yellow cards, for example. And I really wish there was some backstory to the viruses. I do feel like this game has a lot of potential for a story narrative. And this is what's keeping me from picking up the expansion in the later editions. I recognize that the later expansions pretty much hit all my nagging points, and I understand that there's actually a story version of Pandemic broken up into colored seasons. That's pretty cool. It's just that the initial version of Pandemic made me shut myself up on Madagascar and close all points of entry. And I also have a different pile of games I prefer too. Regardless, the group will have fun playing this game. Because afterwards, it's a fun discussion of talking about what you could have done better, or maybe a different strategy, or sometimes it's as humorous as roasting a person for drawing a terrible card. For most people, I'd say go get this game. If it's within your budget and you're seeking a simple to teach game, and it's cooperative, go pick it up. Everyone I've played this game with really enjoyed it, and they always have a tense time at the end. There's often discussion of the best strategies, and there's often comparison to a zombie film. It's very relatable to most people, and the game isn't hyper complex either. All games feel very controllable, and the game is very difficult to beat at later stages. Sometimes you feel invincible as you spread out to the four corners of the world and establish bases. Then all of a sudden you're confronted with a huge boulder in your path. And then you become Chris Redfield. Either you succumb to the virus, or you explode out and punch the antibodies into the boulder and make it move. It's a great game for a wide range of people. And if I ever play future versions of Pandemic or the expansion, then I might make a review of it. Who knows? But I want to know what you think of this game. If you played Pandemic, whether the base game or any of the expansions or maybe the season ones, what are your thoughts on it? Leave a comment. If this review was entertaining or if it helped you on a buying decision, leave a like. It really helps out. Subscribe for more cool content, and I'll see you next time. This is how it feels like when everyone has a separate plan to stop the epidemic.
We both want the same thing here.